Just got word late yesterday that the longtime music director of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, Alexander Mickelthwate, is going to be moving on. He's heading down south to Oklahoma City to be in charge of their symphony orchestra. And so we brought in the studio the president of the board of directors with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, Terry Sargeant, to chat a little bit about that. So good morning, Terry.
Good morning.
Pleasure to have you here. First time.
It is,
in
Michael.
our studios. And you were saying you've been with the WSO for a year as president. And how many years as on the board?
I'm in my 6th year on the board.
In your 6th year on the board. Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here at our station. We've been involved with the symphony since we started, first few years of our existence here at the station. So nice to have you here.
Well, thank you.
So what's the word? Tell us how it all went down and Alexander moving on.
Well, we've known for some time that Alexander was in searches with other orchestras across North America. And about 3 weeks ago, Alexander sent me an email and wanted to meet. So I went into the office and he informed me that he had been selected as the successful candidate for the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. Obviously, it wasn't released. The news wasn't released in Oklahoma City until yesterday afternoon. Mm-hmm. So it was basically top secret. I didn't tell anybody for a couple of weeks, and then a couple of members of the executive were brought in, and then last Tuesday, Alexander and I met with Trudy Schroeder, the executive director of the symphony, and informed her, and Trudy put together the communications material and arranged for a meeting yesterday afternoon. At which we informed the board, the staff, and the musicians of the symphony of Alexander's news. Mm-hmm. And this was at exactly the same time that Oklahoma City, at their annual general meeting, was introducing Alexander as their new music director.
So you're saying he's been searching for an orchestra for a little while, so it didn't come necessarily as a huge surprise, but it's always
a surprise. You never know the timing. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the of this business that music directors, conductors, maestros, whatever you want to call them, mm-hmm. Move around. You know, there's a certain turnover
lifespan.
There's a certain lifespan. There's a certain turnover. Then, you know, the conductors are looking for new challenges. Mm-hmm. Alexander's had a long run with the symphony. In fact, as of next June, when his contract expires or ends, he will have been with the symphony for 12 years, which will tie him with Bramwell Tovey as one of the 2 longest-serving music directors we've ever had.
Mm-hmm. That says something about the organization, I think, too, that they're able to keep conductors for so long. Huh?
Well, I think in the last decade, I mean, as most Winnipeggers will know, about 15 years ago, early in the aughts, the symphony had some difficulties. It had difficulties financially. It had difficulties with a lot of turnover in the executive director position, and to a lesser extent, some fairly quick turnover even at the music director position. In the last decade, it's really stabilized. It's got a solid board, and I don't want to take credit for that. I'm a relative newcomer in the leadership role on the board. People before me stabilized the board. Trudy Schroeder came in about a decade ago and stabilized the administration. We've now got a solid administration, a strong board, and I think a strong orchestra. Mm-hmm. The orchestra gets very good reviews, both within our city and from critics from outside the city.
Mm-hmm. I'm in conversation with Terry Sargeant. He is the president of the board of directors of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. We're just chatting about the fact that it was just announced that Alexander Mickelthwate is moving south to Oklahoma Symphony Orchestra, and he will be the music director of the orchestra down there. So this coming season will be his final season. So, Terry, what's the process next for finding somebody new?
Well, we have an ongoing, what we call a continuity process, which isn't really a search process. It's just sort of keeping our fingers, our feelers out just to see who and what might be available when the time comes. In the last few years, we've had, we always have a number of guest conductors. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've had some very good guest conductors. some of whom we'll invite to join our search. A formal search process has not begun, obviously, because this was basically a secret until yesterday afternoon.
Yep.
Some of us will meet later this morning to have a first discussion of this. Coincidentally, later on today is a regularly scheduled executive meeting, so we'll discuss this some more at that point. But there will be a formal process initiated soon. Winnipeggers and our audience tend to be engaged in these kind of processes, so we'll try to keep them as informed as possible and make the process as open as we possibly can, knowing that we also have to keep some confidentialities. We will involve the community as much as we can, and we'll certainly involve the musicians in the orchestra.
So what are the challenges of finding somebody to... I mean, Alexander was so heavily involved in the community. I mean, he was here so many times, and he had such a full schedule. So I guess that's one of the challenges. What are the other challenges of finding somebody?
That one is certainly a big challenge. He was extremely engaged in the community. He was a good and a big player in the Winnipeg art scene. So that will be hard to replace. It's often difficult to. Particularly in today's world, to have a conductor, particularly a conductor of significant quality and stature, move to our community. In some cases, in many much larger orchestras, in much larger cities, the conductors don't move to the city on a permanent basis. They have gigs elsewhere, or they have homes in Berlin or in New York, and they commute. We would hope that. And it'll certainly be one of our top criteria. It may or may not be a deal breaker, but we would certainly hope that the next music director would move to Winnipeg and become engaged in the community. The music director plays a very important role off the stage as well. Communicating with the audience, as you said, Alexander has done many times in this studio, but also in fundraising, which is a very important aspect of running a modern orchestra. A lot of the people one approaches for donations of a significant size to the orchestra like to be approached by the music directors, but also just spreading the word in the community. I mean, getting out into the schools, developing new audiences for the future. These are all very important roles for the music director, and as you've noted, Alexander was very good at that. So we'll have to work some to match that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to see him go because he was such a fun guy to be around, lots of energy. But it's something to look forward to. Look forward to the future. I mean, there's
there are musically there are a lot of excellent young conductors out there. I think we will probably be able to match. I have no doubt we'll be able to match Alexander's musical skills. It's the community aspect that may be a little more difficult to find.
Yeah, and his smile, his enthusiasm.
Yes. And that video with the cucumbers on his eyes. The tourism video.
Yeah, put that in. They must have that in their resume, willing to put cucumbers on their eyes.
Well, there's a good point. Maybe we'll put that in our criteria.
Well, Terry, thanks for coming by this morning. Pleasure to meet you for the first time, and we'll definitely have you back again as the search goes on, and look forward to hearing what goes on with it.
Sure. No, I'd be glad to come back, Michael, and thank you for inviting me. We will certainly want the community to know about the search and how it's going, and what the parameters are and what the timelines are. Etc. So I'd be glad to come back.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that happens. I've been in conversation with Terry Sargeant. He is the president of the board of directors of Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. We're just chatting about the fact that it was announced just this morning, essentially, that Alexander Mickelthwate will be, it's his final year coming up, 2017, 2018. He's moving down south to be the conductor and the music director of the Oklahoma Symphony Orchestra. So again, Terry, thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you.